Hoshyar Zebari appeared to be more of an American negotiator than an Iraqi foreign minister. Iraqi Accord Front.
Welcome back to Inside Iraq. We are talking to Ambassador Ryan Crocker, U.S. Ambassador to Iraq, one-on-one and exclusive on Inside Iraq. Many Iraqis are a little bit concerned that this agreement might entail some supplement, some undeclared provisions that they will not be privy to see it. Not only the Iraqis, but even the U.S. Congress somehow frustrated by not knowing what is going on right now regarding the negotiations, to the degree they have asked Iraqi legislators to proceed all the way to Washington and tell them what is really going on. Can you assure the viewers, as a representative of the U.S. government, that this final agreement will not include any secret provisions or supplements?
Jassim, we have said repeatedly, Iraqi government representatives have said repeatedly, this is going to be an open and transparent document. The Iraqi laws, as we understand it, call for that, this agreement must go before Parliament. And on our side as well, we have pledged to be fully open with the Congress of the United States. We're in the process of negotiation now, and in a complex negotiation, which this is, it doesn't make a lot of sense to be briefing anyone's parliament in detail on positions that are not yet final, that are likely to shift as the negotiations proceed.
Many people say this is nothing more than an agreement between the U.S. president and the Iraqi government. Do you look at it that way?
It is, in the U.S. system, an executive agreement. An executive agreement is legally binding, but at the same time, it's binding while it is in force. There is nothing in this agreement or any other executive agreement that would tie the hands of this or any future president.
Ambassador, let's move on into other subject, and that is Lieutenant General James Dubik. He says that the Iraqi troops will be, by 2009, will be really fully functional. The role of the United States forces in Iraq, it will be for training and for other issues. To what extent do you believe that Iraqi forces will be able to take hold of their destiny, their country, and the security of the country?
Iraqi forces are already taking hold of the security and the destiny of the country. The progress that Iraqi security forces have made over the past year is simply amazing. 75% of Iraq's military units are now in the lead in providing security in this country.
If that is the case, Ambassador, how do you explain the conflicting assessment by the General Accountability Office of the U.S. Congress, when on this particular point that you just mentioned, that the figure is not 70% Iraqi forces capable of operating on their own without support and planning by the U.S. Congress, i.e. to conduct counterinsurgency operations. They put it only at 10%.
I think what you're referring to, Jassim, is something we call operational readiness assessments that are divided into 4 categories, 1 being the highest and 4 being the least capable. These are mathematical formulas that have to do with numbers of officers, numbers of non-commissioned officers, and so forth. If a unit is at ORA 2 instead of ORA 1, that doesn't mean it's somehow incapable of fighting. The ORA 2 units are perfectly capable of doing that. They are doing it, and they are in the lead in providing security.
Your embassy in Baghdad recently issued a statement, perhaps in reference in response to a request by a U.S. congressman, that only 3 out of the 18 benchmarks stipulated by U.S. Congress as a condition for supporting Iraq have not been met. By the same token, I go back to the General Accountability Office. They say it is not 3 out of 18, but rather 9 out of 18 have not been met. And in your report, it says most of these benchmarks are satisfactory rather than excellent. Let's just take, for instance, the revised de-Ba'athification law. According to your own assessment, as well as Congress, that is still yet to be carried out. Most of the members of that new team have not been met, and the law has not been implemented.
There's an important distinction that we're trying to make here. When we talk about the benchmarks, we're talking about either fully realized or satisfactory progress being made to their realization. If one is trying to assess reality in Iraq, it is not a black and white situation. Just take security forces, for example. While you do not have 100% of Iraqi security forces at the top tier of operational readiness, that in no way means they are not capable forces. They are. We may not have 100% implementation on something like de-Ba'athification reform, but there is a law, and they are now working on how to fully implement it through the establishment of a new commission and so forth. So we think that indicates there is satisfactory progress, even though every final step has not yet been taken.
We mentioned about the improved security in Iraq, and there are several factors for that. Perhaps the readiness of the Iraqi forces and their number increased to more than 560,000 Iraqi troops, the ceasefire by Muqtada al-Sadr, the crackdown against al-Qaeda and the militias, but also from several sources, indications are that Iran somehow is stopping or perhaps lessening the provision of the IEDs, the EPFs, the training, the funds. How do you assess, how do you read this lull in the aggressiveness of Iran in the past?
With respect to Iran, Iran has suffered some setbacks in recent months. Militias that they have supported, that they have armed, trained, and financed, have gone into combat against Iraqi security forces and have been significantly hurt. Many elements of these militias have fled into Iran. So I think the real reason for the improvement in security is not what the Iranians are doing to make things better, but the damage that the Iraqi government's forces have done to militias that Iran has supported. Iran has a choice to make here. Their stated policy is to support a democratic government in Iraq. What they have been doing in recent years has been the opposite. It's been to undermine that government. As this government becomes more and more capable, it's time for the Iranians to make a choice to support that government and to stop supporting militias.
Is there an or else ambassador after this?
I said it just as I meant it. Iran is Iraq's neighbor. It will always be Iraq's neighbor, and it needs to decide what kind of relationship it wants. The past between these two countries is extremely bitter. There is an opportunity here to build a much more stable future for Iran, for Iraq, and for the region. But that is not going to happen with the course that Iran has been on, supporting militias instead of supporting the government.
Ambassador, a very final question in less than 30 seconds. How do you assess Iraq's future? Is Iraq going to emerge out of this chaos and bloodshed as a democratic, prosperous country, a beacon for the rest of the region?
Iraq is emerging from the violence of the past couple of years as a democratic country in charge of its own affairs. In that sense, the future is now. There are many, many challenges out there. It will take a long time, I think, for Iraqis to overcome all of the problems they inherited from the Saddam era, but the progress they've made, where they are today, I think can give us all tremendous encouragement that the future is going to be far, far brighter than the past.
U.S. Ambassador to Iraq, Ryan Crocker, thank you for being a guest on Inside Iraq.
Thank you, Jason.
To access the show and to send us your comments, please go to aljazeera.net/English. That's all the time we have for this week. Join me next week when we take another look inside Iraq. Until then, goodbye.